Hi, and thank you for visiting my channel. For more information, kindly subscribe and follow. Now let's get started. Paul Heyman's name has been buzzing among fans since the latest episode of WWE SmackDown. The biggest reason for this is Roman Reigns' attempted phone call to his Wiseman during the closing moments of the show. The call failed to connect because Heyman's number was out of service. This development has sparked widespread speculation, with many fans believing that Heyman might have betrayed the original tribal chief in favor of former WWE champion The Rock. Paul Heyman has two phones, and only one got destroyed during an episode of SmackDown following WrestleMania XL. Paul Heyman attempted to call Roman Reigns while standing in the ring with Solo Sikoa. However, as soon as the new Bloodline leader noticed, he snatched the phone from Heyman's hands and smashed it in the middle of the ring. This led many to believe that this incident might explain why Heyman's number was later reported as out of service. However, if you recall an earlier episode of Raw, the WWE Hall of Famer was seen holding two phones while standing alongside Roman's Bloodline. This was during the road to WrestleMania XL when Heyman called Roman Reigns and The Rock from two separate phones. Since only one phone was destroyed by Solo Sikoa, it suggests the phone dedicated to the final boss is still operational. This has fueled speculation that Paul may have betrayed the original tribal chief and is now secretly aligned with The Rock. The Wiseman never turned into a complete babyface as manager. Paul Heyman has primarily been a heel manager throughout his career in the Stamford-based promotion. For a brief period following WrestleMania XL, the 59-year-old appeared to adopt a babyface role as he found himself isolated in the absence of Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso. However, he never fully transitioned into a complete babyface character. This only strengthens the possibility of him betraying Roman Reigns in favor of the final boss. Paul Heyman has a big reason to betray Roman Reigns, and the OG Bloodline Roman Reigns went on a hiatus after losing the undisputed WWE Universal title to Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania XL. In his absence, Solo Sikoa took over the Bloodline as he booted out Jimmy Uso and added Tama Tonga, Tongaloa, and Jacob Fatu to the stable. When Heyman was harassed by Solo Sikoa and company, he seemingly pleaded for help from Jey Uso during a backstage segment at Backlash France 2024. However, the YEET Masters showed no concern. Similarly, Sami Zayn paid no attention to Heyman's plight. Even Roman Reigns didn't come to the aid of his Wiseman. This highlights a crucial point: when the OG Bloodline needed the Wiseman, he was there for the faction members. But when Paul Heyman needed their support against Solo Sikoa and company, they were nowhere to be found. This could explain why Heyman might align with The Rock, as he may find refuge and support from the final boss after being expelled by Solo's faction. The atmosphere inside the WWE arena was electric as the crowd chanted Roman Reigns' name, eagerly awaiting the tribal chief's entrance. Roman had been dominant, unyielding, and practically untouchable as the leader of the Bloodline. But whispers had begun to swirl in the shadows, rumors of a betrayal, of Paul Heyman pulling the strings behind the scenes, scheming in a way that could undo everything Roman had built. Could the man who had been Roman's greatest advocate already have betrayed him for another former WWE champion? The setup: it had been months since Paul Heyman had helped solidify Roman's reign as the tribal chief. His guidance, his persuasive words, and his uncanny ability to manipulate the situation had played a pivotal role in Roman's meteoric rise to the top. However, behind the scenes, things were shifting. Heyman, ever the opportunist, had built connections with some of the top names in WWE history, always seeking the next big thing, the next chance to control the narrative. Roman Reigns, despite his power, had trusted Heyman implicitly, but in the world of professional wrestling, trust was a fragile thing. Heyman had been known to abandon allegiances if it meant gaining more power, and his loyalty was often only as strong as the opportunity in front of him. At first, Roman had been blind to the possibility of betrayal. After all, Heyman was the man who had helped him secure victories, who had convinced the higher-ups that he was the future of WWE. But recently, Heyman had been acting strangely, his interactions with other wrestlers, the cryptic messages he'd been sending. and his unusual long conversations with an enigmatic figure backstage raised more than a few eyebrows. The shifting allegiance, it all came to a head one night during an episode of SmackDown. Roman Reigns was set to face a new challenger, one who had been making waves ever since their return to the ring, Drew McIntyre. Drew had a history with Roman, a history that involved both men vying for supremacy in WWE. The match was bound to be intense, but what no one expected was what transpired in the moments leading up to it. As Roman made his grand entrance, Paul Heyman, who had been standing by his side as usual, paused. He had his eyes locked on something in the distance, something or someone. The camera lingered on his face, capturing the subtle change in his expression. Heyman's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he looked torn. It wasn't just a fleeting glance, it was a moment of realization. When the match began, Heyman, as always, stood by Roman's side, watching closely. But something was different in his demeanor. The confidence he once had while supporting Roman seemed to have waned. In the heat of the moment, after a brutal exchange between Roman and Drew, Heyman's focus shifted away from the match. He glanced towards the ramp again, where none other than Brock Lesnar was making his unexpected return. The crowd erupted in shock. Brock had been absent for months, and the anticipation of his return was palpable. But for Paul Heyman, the moment was more than just a comeback, it was a signal, a turning point in his plans. As Brock made his way down the ramp, Roman noticed Heyman's distracted gaze. For a brief moment, their eyes met, but the tension was thick. Roman, ever the astute strategist, could sense something was off. He had trusted Heyman, but the presence of Brock Lesnar could only mean one thing: Paul Heyman had already chosen his next champion. The betrayal unfolds. The moments after Brock's arrival were chaotic. Drew McIntyre took advantage of the distraction, landing a Claymore kick on Roman Reigns. As Roman staggered back, stunned, the unthinkable happened. Paul Heyman, instead of assisting Roman, turned away, walking straight towards Brock Lesnar. The camera zoomed in on Roman's face, capturing the moment of realization. Roman stood motionless for a second, his eyes wide with disbelief. Brock and Paul exchanged a look that said it all. Heyman had betrayed him. It was no longer a rumor, it was a reality. Paul Heyman had sided with Brock Lesnar once again, and Roman Reigns had been left in the dust. The fans were left in stunned silence as Brock and Heyman stood together in the center of the ring. Heyman, with his signature smile, raised Brock's hand high. The symbol of a new alliance, one that would shake the very foundation of WWE. It was clear, Paul Heyman was no longer the wise counsel of the tribal chief. He had returned to his old ways, and he had chosen the beast incarnate over Roman Reigns. The aftermath, the fallout from the betrayal, was swift and devastating. Roman Reigns, blindsided by his longtime advocate's defection, was left to deal with the emotional and psychological toll of the betrayal. The next week, on SmackDown, Roman stormed into the arena, a fire burning in his eyes. He demanded answers, but Paul Heyman was nowhere to be found. Instead, Brock Lesnar stood tall in the center of the ring, mocking Roman's frustration. Roman, no longer the confident champion he once was, could only seethe with anger. He had trusted Paul Heyman to be his ally, his voice, his strategic partner. But now, that trust had been shattered. The bloodline was fracturing, and the world was about to witness a war between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar that would consume WWE for months to come. As for Paul Heyman, his decision was one of cold calculation. He knew that Brock Lesnar, despite his absence, was still a force to be reckoned with. Lesnar had been the man to dethrone the greats, to break barriers, and he was the one who could take down Roman Reigns. Heyman had always been about control, and with Lesnar by his side, he could once again wield that control over WWE's narrative. The return of the Beast. Brock Lesnar's return was only the beginning. With Paul Heyman once again in his corner, the duo became a force that Roman Reigns could no longer ignore. The Beast was back, and he was ready to take back the WWE Universal Championship, but the real story was the personal vendetta between Roman and Brock. It wasn't just about titles, it was about respect, loyalty, and who truly held the power in WWE. Roman Reigns, angry and betrayed, would stop at nothing to reclaim his spot at the top. He would gather the remnants of the bloodline, and together, they would try to fight back against the duo of Heyman and Lesnar. But in the world of WWE, alliances are fragile, and trust is even more so. Paul Heyman's betrayal had changed the game, and now, it was anyone's guess who would emerge victorious from this chaotic new chapter. Conclusion: Paul Heyman had made his choice, and Roman Reigns was left to pick up the pieces of his broken empire. The alliance between Heyman and Lesnar had opened a new chapter in WWE, one filled with intrigue, betrayal, and an epic battle for supremacy. Roman Reigns would never forget this betrayal, but in the world of WWE, vengeance is often just another chapter in a never-ending saga. And as the Beast and the Wise Man stood side by side, Roman Reigns was left to plot his next move in a war that had just begun.